Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I thought today I'd have a quick look at the Aerangis. I only have three. I used to have a fourth. I used to have Aerangis Orchids, which is one of the larger ones. Plants are large phalaenopsis type leaves, and I had that plant a couple of years. It then decided to bloom, and the bloom spike took over a year to develop to its full size and open its blooms, but it was a very large spike. I think it was well over 2 feet long, from memory, because it's a while ago. And then the following year, within a week, it just died. I never found out why. If anybody's got any Aerangis and they're a bit short on information, I've got a book on the genus, very authoritative book with quite a lot of information about each species. So if anybody wants one looked up, I can always sort of pass on the information about any of those. You could also go and get the book yourself. It's just called Aerangis. It's by Isabelle Lacroix, Croix, French. Anyway, I've got three, one of which is going to flower in the near future. But anything to do with Aerangis, it's a don't hold your breath. They are relatively slow in all aspects, although I have got some that have pushed out a lot of roots that grew quite quickly. This one's going to flower soon. The buds are actually showing now. It starts off with a dead straight spike. This is the latest one. Yeah, looks absolutely straight. And then where the nodes are, the buds start to swell, and then as the buds start to swell, it gets a zigzag look to it. Yeah, and this allows the buds to extend away from where the other buds will be, and when they open, they've got their own little space. That's quite clever. I like that. Aerangis, as far as I know, virtually across the board, are night scented and pollinated by night flying insects, mainly moths. The Orchids that I was talking about is still relatively easily found in the wild, but it is destined to become extinct. Now you might find this odd, but basically the hawk moths that pollinate those blooms are on the verge of extinction. They're getting wiped out by things like bushfires and stuff like that, and without the specific pollinator, the plant will eventually die out. So it will become extinct because of the pollinator. So it's a very balanced world that our orchids can come from in some cases. Anyway, the three that I've currently got, Aerangis fastuosa has leathery strappy leaves. It grows quite well for me, and it blooms every year. Last year I had 2 bloom spikes with a few blooms on each one. I'll put a pop-up. I think I've got a picture. This is a slow grower, but it has pushed out a side plant now. Strictly speaking, on these plants, they're not kikis. They do have a bushing habit, so they will push out plantlets to the side. I'll call them plantlets. They're not strictly speaking kikis. Yeah, phalaenopsis shaped leaves, leathery, strappy, and like virtually all Aerangis, the blooms are either white or a greenish colour, greenish white. Some have pinkish tinges, some can have slightly orange tinges, but they do tend to be tinges, not colours. They are fundamentally white. They don't need bright colours because their pollinators are out at night. They're attracted by scent, so they just don't need the bright colours. This one has grown a lot of roots this year, and because it's got thick leathery leaves, you'd expect the roots to be thick. But this is the phalaenopsis mindset. These are not phalaenopsis. They might look a bit like a mini phal, but the roots are very fine on this one. They have a lovely orange tip to them when they're new. And it's pushed out quite a lot this year. So it's growing well, slowly, but well. And as I said, that's bloomed for me every year for a while now. Let me just get this right. If that's Mr. Sidii, which I think it is, yes, right. This must therefore be Decariana, because I know it hasn't got a tag. So this is Aerangis Decariana. This is the third year this one's bloomed for me. You can see these don't need to be large plants to bloom. You know, this is their size. This is in effect two plants on a single mount. So one's got 3 spikes, one's got 2. This is progressing because the first year it bloomed, I had 1 spike. The next year it bloomed, I had 2 on that plant and 1 on the other. This year I've got 2 and 3. So the plants are getting stronger and able to push out more spikes as they get stronger. Lovely patterning on the leaves, delicate, and wavy edges, which is a trait of quite a lot of the Aerangis. The other good thing about Aerangis is a lot of them are quite small, so they don't take up a lot of space. They also don't take up a lot of looking after either. They're not bad. This one's pushed out quite a lot of new roots this year, or these have, not this one. But, so that one's coming on well. We'll see the blooms on that soon. And then this is the non-bloomer for me. This one is Mr. Sidii, and that's in Mr. as in Mystic, not Mr. as in Mr. and Mrs. I'll put the names up anyway. This one's grown a lot of roots recently, and this one does have thick, strappy roots, despite it being a relatively small plant. Now this is a non-bloomer, and I have no idea why, apart from the fact it could still be a relatively young plant, although I've had this a few years now. They always say if you've got a non-bloomer, try giving it a bit more light. Well, given the tinges around the edges of the leaves, I would suggest it's getting enough light, if not a trifle too much, maybe even. And I've never known heavy on the light without burning to actually inhibit blooms, but for some reason this one hasn't bloomed yet. But it's a very attractive plant. Again, it's a miniature, or I would call it a miniature. Lovely wavy edges to the leaves. So that's my 3. You've got a variety of habitats. I mean, these are fundamentally African orchids, and a lot of them are endemic to Madagascar. And they're having trouble in Madagascar because an awful lot of that country, the forests are just getting wiped out to grow crops and things. So habitat destruction, typical cause, us. But then people got to eat. But anyway, it's an interesting genus. These are not difficult to look after. And you've got varieties because a lot of them are in evergreen, humid forests. You know, so they're not high light lovers as such, but some are. Some of them grow on forest edges or in forest clearings, on the edges of the clearings, where they do get quite a lot of bright light, so you'd need to know the difference. And some of them come from forests that have a seasonal dry spell. You know, so they could be thought of as having a bit of a rest because the rain levels would drop down, seasonally dry, yeah? So you'd need to know a little bit about the one you've got or the ones you've got, because the care would need to vary depending on the habitat it comes from. None of them, as far as I know, are subjected to any form of cold, they're going to do fine in intermediate temperatures. You know, as long as they don't get too chilled at night, they should be okay. And I haven't read about any that don't mind mind heat. You know, they'll all put up with warm temperatures. So, but they do like humidity in the main. But then that's orchids. You could almost say that across the board, couldn't you? Although some are more tolerant with lower humidity, but that doesn't mean to say they like it, they just put up with it. You know, most come from environments where the humidity is going to be maintained, and it's pretty good. And obviously, because of the temperature drops between day and night, the humidity rises dramatically at night as the temperature drops. So, but as I say, if anybody wants to know about an individual species of Aerangis, leave a comment and I'll look it up and put the. I'm not going to recite the whole book. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing anyway. But I mean, I can rearrange the words into well-known phrases and sayings, so that nobody gets in trouble. I find these interesting. there are a couple on my wish list that I haven't come across yet. But a huge collection of Aerangis might not be the best of ideas because the flowers are incredibly similar. They all have a look about them. Some have got thinner petals and sepals, some have got thicker ones. They've all got a spur out of the back, storing nectar for the pollinators. And they do tend to be up the white end of the spectrum, some being pure white, some having little tinges of browns and bronzes, oranges, pinks, but they are tinges. And green is quite prominent on these as well. Not bright green, you know, not your sort of Cattleya green dragon type green, tinges, I would say. Fundamentally white with tinges. And varying in sizes. I don't think there are any that you would say had huge blooms. They all tend to be probably this size, hibiki size. That's about the size of most Aerangis blooms. Some are larger. Not much though. I mean, I don't believe there are any that have got a bloom that sort of size. Yeah, if there are, that would be classed as a very large blooming Aerangis. They're mostly this sort of size, so you know, a couple of centimeters across, but highly fragrant after it gets dark. And when this one blooms, that will fill the grow room with powerful fragrance. Yeah, the fragrance on these is pretty powerful. It's got to drift off through the forest and attract the moths, so quite strong. The chances are, because this is going to have so many blooms open together, these two spikes should come out together. That'll be followed by this one and this one maybe together, and then last this one, because that was the last one to start. So I'll have two out together, and with that number of blooms it will fill this grow room easily. And with the door open in the evening, I expect it will even drift off into the lounge, and I'll sort of go out in the kitchen to replenish the glass of wine possibly, and come back into the lounge and think, what's that I can smell? Oh, it's the Aerangis. Pretty strong, pretty powerful. So if you're not into that sort of thing, they may not be the best to get. But most of them are quite small. They're easily accommodated. And in the realms of difficulty, I wouldn't call these difficult to look after. They like a wet-dry cycle, or that's how I treat mine. Some of them come from moist evergreen forests where they probably stay wet a lot more. But then they're in a more perfect environment. The way I treat mine is like I would a mounted Cattleya. So they get absolutely soaked, and then they get left to dry. And then depending on the time of year and how warm it is, the next watering will follow on. In the winter, these don't get watered that often, and they get watered more gently. They don't get absolutely drowned, they get more of a trickle. The bare roots get some water on them, but I try and keep the mount itself a little bit drier. So quite easy to look after as orchids go. So if you've got some mounted orchids, be they dendrobiums or smaller Cattleyas or anything along those lines. I mean, I've got some oncidiums mounted, or an oncidium. I don't know whether there's more than one. These are quite easy. Some are okay in pots, but I would suggest this one, it recommends growing in a pot because of the fine root system. But it does also mention that if the roots stay wet too much, they'll rot. So I mounted mine, and it seems to do well. The ones with the larger, fleshier roots, obviously, if they're going to go in a pot, they would need some large, chunky stuff. Because, you know, roots that come out like this and are happy in the air don't normally like being confined and shut into soggy masses. They're going to rot, I suspect. I've never tried it, but with other types of orchids, that's how it works. Yeah? Yeah. There are some orchids, or there's one of the Aerangis that has never been found in the wild growing on anything but bark. It never grows with other plants. It's always on bare bark. And it's only ever been found on two types of trees. That might not be a good one to get and take home, because it's obviously got something going on with the tree it grows on. There's a relationship there of some sort. Maybe the tree gives off some sort of exudes something through the bark that the plant likes. But yeah, so some of them have got quite specific environments, but most are reasonably easily accommodated on a mount. They do okay. So that's the Aerangis, and at the moment I have 3. I have some others on my list, but the chances of coming across them are extremely small. So some are readily available in collections. Fastuosa seems to turn up quite often. I don't see Decariana for sale very often. Mr. Sidii comes up. I've seen that for sale quite often. Often tiny little plants as well. So but they are in the main small to medium orchids. There are a few giants amongst them, but as I say, Alicei that I used to have was quite a big version of an Aerangis. If you can imagine that with leaves 7 or 8 inches long, that's the sort of plant it was. So if a leaf is 7 or 8 inches in both directions, that's a pretty big plant, as Aerangis go anyway. So a chat about the Aerangis genus. Rewarding if you like fragrance, but not daytime. No fragrance at all during the day. It has to get dark, and then as soon as it's dark, it starts and becomes more powerful as the evening wears on. So I enjoy my 3. They don't take a lot of effort. They just do their thing. So say this one blooms regular every year. This one has for some time, and this one, you listening, if you look at these 2, that's how it's done. Now come on. It's a shame because it's a smashing plant. Oh, it's healthy, it's strong, it's got a flipping good root system that's almost doubled in size this year. Why won't you bloom? I'm going to go away and look this one up. There might be something that I've missed. Could just be something. I mean, this one is a high light one. This one grows in clearings and open river valleys where it's growing on trees where it can get some sun. But they are moist river valleys because of the river and the moving water. But this one likes a lot of light. This one doesn't. Yeah? So we'll have a look and we'll have a play. Maybe that one needs a move to somewhere else. Talking of where they live, these 2 live exactly where they are. This one lives up here because it's a high light one. So it goes up near the roof where it gets the higher light. And it might be that this one is going to go up there soon. I'm going to go and look that up and see what it says. Yeah. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.